Standing up in McKinney. This is, according to Callus, episode 595. The cycle continues. That's the title for today. You know, I just happen to be in a good mood. Well, let's see. It's a Monday. It's the day before the primary election hopefully wraps up. Now, unfortunately, there's a good possibility there's going to be 1 to 2, possibly even a third runoff here in Collin County. So that means we get yet another 5 or 6 weeks of, well, let's just call it annoying phone calls and mailings. But before we get to the other items of the day, let me remind you the best way that you can help me continue to grow the show, make a difference, get our voices heard. And quite frankly, a lot of times I feel like I'm the lone voice in the wilderness, but we have to get it out there. We have to talk about it, and we have to be willing to engage with others. So if you'll like, share, and subscribe to this program, if you'll post it up on your favorite social media, keeping in mind, I do have a page and a group on Facebook. I am now a pro at Gab, and guess what? I even show up at MeWe, and for the time being, the program is still available through YouTube. And with that, on with the show. Okay. Well, let's see. I already kind of touched base. The primaries coming to an end. So it has been an interesting season, to say the least. I don't consider myself any kind of master strategist. I don't consider myself any political guru. I know people that maybe I would classify as that, and I just don't understand why some of the things went on this cycle or this season that went on. But here we are. I find myself increasingly as the voice of reason when talking to certain people, and that's a new concept for me. I've never been one to just fly off the handle on things like this. You know, we all have our younger years where we get angry and we maybe fly off the handle, but you don't do things that you can't undo, and you don't take actions that have long-term repercussions if you can help it. And I've known people that have done that, and I've largely avoided any of those. So I'm very grateful to that, and I don't give much credit to myself on that. I would just say that God was looking out for me, and so was my wife, and fortunately I've grown out of it a long time ago. But here we are. All right, so I wanted to talk about a few things that went down over the weekend, and one of them is directly related to a comment or a mention from a church service. Now, I always am caught between the rock and the hard place. I don't wish to dunk on my church specifically, and I don't want to be so broad as to say all churches everywhere. So I will just say I've observed firsthand through the years that most churches follow a similar trajectory. They're on the same wavelength. It may not be exactly the same. It may not be, word for word, but they're in a similar place, particularly if they're in the same city or the same denomination. And so I came across a couple of interesting things over the weekend. First and foremost, it's become readily apparent to me that the American church continues to sleep. They have zero desire to repent or apologize for their lack of leadership, for their lack of concern for their people when they shut down. 4 years ago, pretty much this week, and that's a terrible anniversary to remember, but 4 years ago, they abandoned their people. Not all of them, of course. And to varying degrees, some were closed for a couple of weeks and some for months and a couple of years, essentially. And look, I try to have a lot of grace. I really do. But man, I find it challenging at the bare minimum to be chastised for being disinvolved, disengaged, and disinterested in what's going on in the church's bodies when they refuse to do the one thing that they ought to do, the one thing that could start to fix or begin the healing process, right? We're called to repent. as individual Christians, but when the church at large makes errors in judgment or bad decisions, they need to hold themselves accountable. They need to lead by example. They need to set the example, and they need to repent. I would love to hear for a series of churches out there to come together and say, you know what? Never again. Never again are we going to sit by the sidelines. Never again are we going to shut down. Never again are we going to tell our people that it was better to stay home. Never again are we going to put government edicts above the call of Christ. Never again are we going to tell people they're on their own. Never again are we going to abandon the least of these by shutting down. Now, I won't be holding my breath on that. I don't expect that there's going to be any massive movement to make that happen. And I know there are some churches out there that, quote, never shut down or opened right back up and immediately dealt with that issue. I know they exist. But it's as if they want to just blot that out and pretend it never happened, which is interesting because they all followed the same zeitgeist of the summer of love, where we were made to feel like if you're a suburban white church, there's something wrong with you. You're lacking. You need more diversity. You need more vibrancy. You need more people that don't look like you, or you're not a real church. Huh? You know, I've talked about this before. I don't see that these people were showing up at the local Asian church down the road here. I don't see them showing up at the quote unquote black church down the street demanding that they change the way they do things, that they be more inviting and opening to people that aren't from their same culture. I didn't see them saying that you ought to have a Chinese language service here. It was only the suburban white churches that were made to feel that way. They were told they were wrong. And of course, Black Lives must matter because, well, we said so. Keeping in mind that I don't think I ever met anybody in a suburban white church, or any church for that matter, that didn't believe that Black lives mattered. I don't think that they felt the need to say anything because, quite frankly, most of us live with the idea that all lives mattered. As a matter of fact, a lot of people that I've known in both Protestant and Catholic churches spend a whole lot of time worrying about babies being murdered in the womb. And I got to tell you, proportionally, a good number of them are from black moms. So if anybody was showing love there, it was those pro-lifers. They weren't the cause of the problem. They weren't the ones perpetuating problems. Now, look, it's not easy. It's not clean. It's not as simple as I just made it. So I'm going to just admit that from the onset. But again, there's no dial back from that. There's no acceptance that perhaps we went a little too far there. Nope. I imagine we'll just see more doubling down because I fully expect 2024 to unfold similarly to 2020. You know, the mystery disease we've already been warned of, the multiple shutdowns that are soon to follow on various forms of media, social and otherwise. And, oh, by the way, now not only are we looking to seize the power grid from Texas, no, we're going to find a way to shut down the phone system. Oh, you didn't think that AT&T really caused that problem with a software update, did you? Come on. Look, the one thing that phone systems are good at is making sure they don't fail. Because there's no money in a system that fails. There's no money in a system that isn't secure. But maybe something else other than money is motivating it. That is a distinct possibility, ladies and gentlemen. But again, as the churches sleep, the cities groan. And what do I mean by that? Well, as we've seen in the last 3.5 years, the cities have suffered the brunt of the massive influx of illegal aliens, of people that are coming here not because they seek a better life, not because they yearn to be free, but no, they're coming here for any number of items, including free stuff, better jobs, and quite frankly, to wait for orders from up on high to cause multiple disruptions and perhaps take down the United States government. And if you think that's, maybe a little tinfoily there, okay, that's fine. Just mark down this episode. That's right, March the 4th. the year of our Lord, 2024, as Stephen Callis says, they're here and they're waiting for orders. You can take for whatever it means. Let's not dwell on it. Let's not lose sleep over it. Just understand that there's something else bigger going on here. Let's not pretend otherwise. But the cities, they're trying to figure out what to do. I mean, they're shutting down services. They're abandoning the very people that pay for the cities to exist to allegedly take care of people that were pushed upon them, that they have no choice but to deal with. And all I say to that is, cry me a river. The very policies that are being reinforced with these cities' actions are the reason that we have the problems that we have. And as far as people yearning to breathe free, I'm holding that judgment out. It is my sincere hope that at least a plurality of the people that are taking advantage of the situation do indeed wish to be free. But I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I guess that's technically items 2 and 3 lumped together. Now let's talk a little bit about a further subject, right? So we've got the idea that states have powers, that states have rights, that they are acting on behalf of we the people. We the people, the sovereigns, have basically formed the state, and the states formed both the federal government and the county and city governments. And that we the people are supposed to dictate the terms on how the state operates. And we wrote up this nice document called the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the various United States codes that are supposed to line out exactly what's supposed to happen, how it's supposed to happen, unless, of course, they just choose to ignore it and, quite frankly, put a boot upon our neck. Now, the states could choose to seize power. They could assert their sovereignty. They could push back. They could make a difference. Once again, we're going into this idea that they have the ultimate authority. They ceded some of that authority and gave it to a federal entity, the general government, if you will, and they continue to perpetuate the idea that they're subservient to that, but in fact they're not. That federal government, that general government, is a creation of the states. The states dictate the terms on which it exists, but they don't act like that. They don't behave like that. And we wonder why we're jammed up the way we are. Now, I know there's a number of people out there that feel all sorts of things about a state looking to be independent, a state pushing back and reasserting its own sovereignty, its independence, if you will. But I'm here to tell you, it isn't just Texas that's looking at this. And this isn't something that happened in a void of time and space. This has been dealt with in the past multiple times. There were negotiated settlements that prevented it prior to 1861. But here we are again. And no, it's not under the same issue. Nobody actually supports the idea that caused the states to secede in the first time around. But here we are. If we can't recognize there's limits to authority and there's limits to power, what are we going to do? Are we willing to allow ourselves to be bullied and put back into a position similar to the spring and summer of 2020? Are we willing to relive that event again and again every 4 years when we've got a cycle coming up? Whether it's the election distraction, whether it's the latest zeitgeist, whether it's the next manufactured phobia that's come on down the pipe, I don't know. But what I do know is we the people have had about enough. We the people need to start acting up and pushing back. Apparently, I need to say this each and every time. Peacefully, non-violently, following the law as much as you possibly can. But there are some laws that, quite frankly, shouldn't exist and are, on the face of them, irrelevant because they violate the constitutional constraints in which they exist. And according to the Founding Fathers, laws that violate the Constitution are null and void at the time of their writing. But unfortunately, we've got some people in black robes that tend to ignore that whenever it seems to fit their narrative. And I feel, once again, I must state, this is not about Trump. Yes, I'm going to go vote for the Donald. Yes, I'm pretty excited to have that guy back and on the scene again here. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to fix anything by himself. By the end of the, or by the time this comes out, he will probably be locking up Super Tuesday, and that'll be the end of Never Nikki Haley. One would hope. One would presume. I have very legitimate concerns that we will spend more time later this summer discussing, or I should say, spring and summer, prior to the run-up of the general election. I see a whole lot of events unfolding that will be very unfortunate for those of us that live in Texas and otherwise red states. I don't see this going very well for us. Now, whether it's on purpose or whether it's just deliberate ignorance, I don't know. I don't care. The fact of the matter is I fully expect we'll pay the consequences. So when we talk about states seizing the time, seizing the day, we've referenced what Hawaii's done. We've referenced what Utah's done. We've talked a little bit about what Alaska's trying to do, what Florida's trying to do, what some of the other states, including Missouri, have done. But the reality is, at this point in time, we need to come to grips with the idea that we're not leaving anything. Now, when we're talking about the idea of Texas independence, now look, I'm going to touch on this a little bit today. I'm not going to do a full Texas Tuesday tomorrow, because quite frankly, it's going to be election day. I'm going to be out late, and I may even miss the episode, but I don't want to spend a whole day talking about Texas independence, even though I fully recognize I missed Independence Day for Texas. And just one moment on this, let me digress. I don't see the point of celebrating an Independence Day that is no longer relevant. That's not to say that it's not important, it's not fun, but it's not relevant. If we really want to celebrate Texas Independence Day, we need to retake our independence. Point taken, said, whatever. Let's move on. The reality is, much like we've heard Reagan, much like we heard like Dick Armey and some of these other guys from years past, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left us. I imagine we'll see some people say, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. But really what it needs to be is, we in Texas didn't leave the Union. The Union left us. Or if you prefer, Idaho, Alaska, New Hampshire, I guess to a lesser extent, Vermont and Florida. We didn't leave the Union. The Union left us. Nobody would encourage an abused wife to travel to another state with her abusive husband in hopes that somehow it's going to fix things. Yet, that's what we're told, that we're giving up, we're fleeing, we're running away. No, it's a matter of survival at this point. We can let the federal government just drive us into the ocean of oblivion, or we can say, I'm jumping off now. I don't know what the right answer is for you. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. But what I am going to do is remind you once and again that we have to think these things through. We have to be willing to have the discussions. We need to give the thought to what could we do, what can we do. So as these primaries come to a season, or the primary season comes to a close, again, it was no surprise that the Dallas Morning News decided to weigh in on this. Again, kind of directly related to both issues, the primaries coming to an end and Texas independence. They were fretting over the idea that over 150 people running for office. I need a little more drink here. Water. Got to wet that whistle. 150 plus people running for office have basically signed off on the Texas First Pledge, basically stating that they will work to get Texas independence. They seem to be in quite the tizzy and quite the huff about this, and how dare people try and do this? Well, I'm sorry. They're doing this through proper legal means and following the process that is currently understood needs to happen to guarantee that we, the people, have a say at what our future representation looks like. You can't ignore the idea that Texas gained its independence over essentially an empire that didn't want to let us go. Nor can you ignore the history of these United States in the way they told an empire that they wanted to go their own separate way. And it's only now, in the current contemporary world that we live in, that we got to get rehashed bad ideas, courtesy of Lincoln, that you can't leave unless we let you. Well, hey, SCOTUS issued an opinion, basically at the point of a bayonet after the Civil War, that, well, actually, you can't choose to leave on your own. Huh? What? So we're just going to ignore what happened prior to that point? We're just going to pretend those things never happened. We're going to just say that it doesn't matter what you think, what's happened in the past no longer matters. We've changed our mind. Is that where we're at now? So the Dallas Morning Snooze, just disappointing. I mean, look, I get it. They're afraid. They're a bunch of little cowards. They don't want anybody to be talking about the forbidden topic. They don't want anybody to discuss the idea that perhaps the feds are just too far gone. Perhaps DC needs to be dumped. They don't want to realize that the Reich is now in place. They're choosing to put their head in the sand and ignore the problems that we have based on some notion that this election cycle is going to fix everything. So best case scenario, the Donald wins. Some unknown vice president gets in. We're still going to deal with essentially an evenly split Senate, which means little and nothing will get done. We're going to still deal with the fact that we're going to maybe, just maybe, have a slight majority in in the U.S. House, which means little to nothing is going to get done, which means we're going to have more fiat-driven executive orders dictating terms on how the country's going to work for the next 4 years. Maybe. That all presumes that we get from here to November without any kind of destructive thing occurring. That presumes that we're going to have a straight up and up ballot. That presumes that there's no other shenanigans that are going to play out. That also presumes that we don't stir up a big enough war that we can just go ahead and postpone the elections like a certain individual in a certain Eastern European country has done. And I put none of this beyond the scope of possibility based upon who the current resident is on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And again, all the things that you're so upset about, the Donald being railroaded for, the current resident is guilty of so much more, if only we would prosecute it. And let me be clear, I really should say, I believe he is guilty of so much more. Because one, he hasn't been convicted of anything, just like the Donald. And two, I don't really know anything more than you do. So I ask you, are you prepared going forward to setting aside the differences, to accepting the disappointment that maybe your preferred candidate didn't win the primary? Are you willing to take, quote unquote, the lesser of evils? Are you willing to accept that I'm going to make this chess move that is the best possible move at this time? Are you willing to accept that we're going to not necessarily get what we want between now and November, but we're going to continue to work towards those goals that we had set in mind? Are you willing to understand that there's a bigger game afoot, whether it's hurting the cities or whether it's the churches resurfacing? I don't think that all of this is completely disconnected and isolated incidences. I think it is a lot of things that are working together and not for our good. Now, you can call it a conspiracy. You can say it's a coincidence. You can disavow the whole thing. You can do anything on that scale. But at the end of the day, you cannot ignore what's happening. You cannot shut your eyes and pretend the very things that we're observing are not happening because it makes you unhappy or uncomfortable or whatever else. we have to accept the world that we're in, for better or for worse. We have to continue to fight the good fight. We have to continue to make a stand. We have to continue to call out evil when evil's there, but we have to also be willing to accept that not everybody sees things the same way we do. Not everybody believes exactly the same way we do. We have to work for a consensus of the majority. We have to be prepared to say sometimes you can't get everything that you want, but you can get the things that you need. Yeah, I know exactly what I just said there. The idea that in order for me to win means they have to lose everything, that's what got us into this place. The left, the progressives, they've been taking a bite of the loaf for decades, and now they've eaten over half of the loaf, and we don't have anything left. Nothing left to subsist on because they're seizing the other half. And we're sitting here bickering amongst ourselves. Tomorrow, the primary in theory is over. Tomorrow, hopefully, the Civil War ends for at least a few more months. The Civil War in the Republican Party, quite frankly, is predictable, somewhat entertaining, debilitating, and destructive. And we need to remember who's on our team. And we need to start acting like they're on our team. Now, I'm not above poking people. I'm not above calling it out when I don't like things. And I'm not above saying that certain people really need to come up and so they need to be humbled. But at the end of the day, when the primary is over, whoever I'm stuck with on my team, that's my team. The team is the team that you have when you hit the field. The team that you hit with the field with is the team that you have to work with. And it doesn't matter what you wanted or what you thought. It's what you got. Sometimes it's less than satisfactory. Sometimes it's less than optimal. But if you can't set it aside and work shoulder to shoulder in order to win the things that need to be won, in order to push back the tyranny where it exists, in order to make a stand that matters, then what's the point? We did our best. We're leaving it all on the field. Now maybe we get rid of some of the dead weight that exists in the party. Maybe we don't. Maybe we get rid of some of the bad actors that pretend to be good Republicans. Maybe we don't. But if we have done all that we can do and we left it all on the field, and then we pick up what's left and we start all over again. And with that, as I said, the cycle continues. And until the next show, I will see you on the other side.